This episode is brought to you by Wholesaling Live, the number one real estate wholesaling event in San Antonio, Texas, hosted by Uncle Charles and Michael Lannis. You don't want to miss that. Also, the Elite Sales and Seller Finance Mastery 2.0 with hosts Max Jimenez and your boy Cash Money Mike. I appreciate you all being here. All right, let's get into it. What's going on? If you're watching on either Facebook or you're on Instagram or you're on YouTube, if you get into the YouTube, you can go ahead and watch this and participate in here completely live. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to paste the control in there. And if you'd like to join me live, I'd be happy to bring you on if you have any questions. It's going to be a completely live Q&A. If you're joining me on Instagram, you'll want to head over to YouTube or my private Facebook group, Creative Real Estate with Cash Money Mike. Or you can find me on YouTube at Cash Money Mike. And you can join in here live. It's been all right. We got our first guest. What's going on? How you doing, Melissa? Melissa, thank you very much for the fire emojis. I appreciate it. And we're live. All right, let's get into it. So, been a little bit of a crazy day today. Got a lot of people reaching out to me on Instagram and on Facebook that are bringing me deals that want me to underwrite some deals. And ultimately, I mean, I'm happy to underwrite deals for a bunch of people, but it takes up a lot of my time. So I sometimes do it and sometimes don't do it. Antonio Garcia, I appreciate you joining us. Sometimes I do it, sometimes I don't do it. It really depends on what the deal looks like. And we got some amazing deals today. We had somebody who was watching me out on Instagram that brought a 6-unit deal out in Jacksonville, Florida. My man Antonio Garcia brought a 15 single-family portfolio, which is amazing. You can go ahead and let me just get rid of you, Fahid. I don't care if you follow me or unfollow me. You can just get out of Dodge. Adios, muchachos. Yeah, so a 15-unit single-family portfolio, which is absolutely amazing. So let's get into it a little bit on what we're looking for, when something comes to me like that. So let's talk about that deal specifically in Jacksonville, Florida. So it's two parcels on one two properties on one parcel. So when you see two structures on one parcel of property, what you really want to try to understand is, number one, they're usually not separately taxed because the parcel gets taxed with the structure on it. But this happens to be a fourplex on the front and then a duplex in the back. And ultimately, they are separate structures. They're separately metered. So how do you kind of allocate? You want to make sure that you're able to allocate your expenses to each of them, right? If you've got a fourplex up front and you've got a duplex in the back, it's super important that your tenants are kind of paying their way, right? I had somebody bring me another 13-unit deal the other day where the landlord was responsible for the water. Well, what's really stopping somebody from running the water all the time, right? And running up that bill. So you want to make sure that when you're kind of underwriting these things, specifically in multifamily, that here's kind of what I'm looking for. Is I'm looking for somebody who is mom and pop, right? In other words, they own it in their personal name. And this is what a tired landlord looks like at the end of the day, right? Because I run into so many investors. I go, who are you looking for? They go, man, I'm just, trying to find tired landlords. And I go, what does a tired landlord look like? And they can't really answer the question. The reality is that you need to understand who you're looking for and what are some of the triggers that are going to help you put some of these seller finance deals together. Now, If it's a single family property and it's a primary residence, it's going to be a little bit more difficult to put them under contract because there's some emotional attachment to it, right? They've built their families there, they've made memories there, they've had holidays there and birthdays and all the special things that come with life. So somebody's primary residence, it's got to be a pretty unique situation for you to put together a seller finance deal, right? But let's look at it from a different standpoint. And if you're watching me here on Instagram, head on over to YouTube or head on over to my Facebook channel, and I will be happy to bring you in if you guys have any questions. So, with a multifamily property, the the seller is usually tied to the money. So they bought the piece of property, whether it be a duplex, a triplex, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 unit. It doesn't really matter. The idea or the mindset when that person purchased that piece of property was that they were going to go in and they were going to have these rentals, and the rentals were going to take care of the mortgage or the loan that they had on it, and whatever extra money they had, they would kind of put inside their pocket. But what happens, at least from what I find, is there's a nice little sweet spot between 6 and 30 units where most of the newer investors think that it's too big for them to play in, but it's too small for some of the bigger guys. Like some of the bigger players who buy 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, ultimately they don't want to play in that 10 unit, 15 unit. So there's a real opportunity there because if you think about people who own it in their personal name, that's just one little checkbox that I kind of want to check off. And they own it in their personal name. They've probably owned it for like 15 or 20 years. And when I find that property, that's a perfect lead for me. I don't need to know all of the numbers behind it. I don't need to know anything yet. I want to know if I find a piece of property that's in somebody's personal name, the jackpot starts to go off in the back of my head where I go, okay, I found a seller. Now, whether or not the seller is motivated still remains to be seen. But if they are attached to the money and I can motivate them with money, then that's exactly what I'm going to do. And obviously, with seller finance, you can overpay for a piece of property. So you can technically motivate people with money, right? Money really does create motivation in a sense. And if we think of the four pillars, right? The money, the timeline, the condition, and price, excuse me, motivation, timeline, condition, and price. Motivation equals money, and timeline equals timeline. So it's all about money and time, money and time. So I find it's a little bit easier to put these seller finance deals together um, on somebody who owns a multifamily piece of property. Now, here's what's so great about multifamily, if you were to go ahead and prospect for it, is that unlike a single family where you only have one source of income, which is one tenant's rent, on multifamily, you could have rent, you could have coin operated laundry machines, you could stripe up some parking lots and give people a parking space for additional money. You could provide some storage. Maybe there's a basement in there. You want to turn it into storage for some of your tenants. So there's ways to generate more money. And when you're talking about multifamily, ultimately the value of the property is tied to the net operating income, which what does that mean, net operating income? That means if on a single family, all I get is rent, on a multifamily, I get rent, storage, parking, coin operated machines. I increase the revenue of the property. And all net operating income is your income on the property. So all the revenue it generates minus the expenses, all the money out. And in my training, I talk very, very much in CRAN language where I'll say it's all about money in and money out. That's really what it's about. It's how much money am I going to be able to take in? How much money am I putting out? And is there a spread? Now, what's so interesting about seller finance is that when you understand where the money goes, it gets very, very interesting. So let's talk a little bit about where the money goes. Okay. Again, if you're joining me on Instagram, head on over to YouTube or head on over to my private Facebook group or my Facebook page, Creative Real Estate with Cash Money Mike, and you'll be able to see this live. All right. So here's what's so interesting about seller finance. So what is it? Number one, it's ultimately you're going to get the seller to be the bank for you. Okay. Now, everybody loves the idea of being the bank, but they only love the idea in theory. When you're sitting around on your couch or at your dinner table or you're driving along in your car with your loved one, you might turn to your girlfriend, your boyfriend, your husband, your wife, your partner and go, it would just be really amazing to be the bank. And if that person had a piece of property completely paid off where they owed nothing on it, and I said to them, I want you to be the bank, that person would clam up automatically and go, I don't want to do that. I just want to get my money. And that's the real mind shift that you have to have. Now, if you think about how people truly get wealthy inside this country, it's through two words. It's through tax and it's through debt. So the debt, meaning the loan or the mortgage, and the way that loan is structured is everything in seller finance. Because if you were to go and buy, let's say that you found a multifamily piece of property and the seller said, absolutely no, I'm not going to accept payments from you. I want you to pay cash, and you didn't have all of the money. You would have to go to the bank and you would have to qualify. And when you go to the bank's going to ask you all about your personal stuff, right? They want to know that you have a job, and then they don't believe you. So they say, okay, prove it to me. And you prove it to them by showing them all your pay stubs. And then they don't believe you again. And they say, well, prove it to me again. And then you got to show them your tax returns. And then they say, well, what is your credit like? And they take all of these things into account. And technically, you can't walk into a bank and say to a bank, I want this amount of money. All of it is predicated on how much money you actually make, how much you can prove you make, and how credit worthy you are. That's how a bank is going to lend you money. So you find a seller, the seller is like, I'm not going to take payments from you. I want you, all I want is my cash. You start going crazy because you're like, shit, I don't have the money. I've got to go ahead and I've got to go to a bank now. And I go to a bank and I qualify. And the bank says, well, Mike, since you only make X amount of dollars per year and you have X amount of expenses per year, we can only loan you this amount. Because what they do is they have their own qualifications for how much you spend each and every month on your expenses. So if you have a car payment, if you have outstanding credit card debt, if you have all of these things, it's do you make enough money to not only cover the debt from your credit card, cover the debt for your car payment, cover your rent payment? Do you have enough money to go ahead and actually float or cover this loan? And you can't walk into a bank and say, "Hey, this is what I want." They tell you what you're going to get. And then that's what it is. And the way the bank makes money is they give you the highest interest rate that they can with the longest timeline that they can. And over that course of time, they make more money. That is so important to understand when it comes to Not only seller finance, just finance in general. The longer the bank has their money out, the more money they're going to make. So if the seller is the bank, the longer they have their money out, the more money they're going to make. A huge benefit for the sellers. Okay? So now you find a piece of property and the seller says, hey, you know what? I like what you're pitching me here. I like the idea that you're going to make me some payments. You will have already asked a bunch of questions that are going to qualify this seller as a seller finance candidate. You will have already asked about their rental rates, why there's a vacancy, what their tenants are like, how much their tenants are paying, are their tenants behind, have they ever been behind, are they getting any assistance, stuff like that, so that you can really get a full picture of what's going on with the seller. But if you find a seller who's technically tied to the money and they're willing to give you time, now you've got yourself a deal. You don't need to know anything else because the purchase price doesn't matter. The rehab really doesn't matter. There isn't a property in America that can't use a rehab, some more expensive than the others. That's just the cost of doing business in real estate. You are going to renovate property, and every property has a problem. So if a seller is willing to give you time, what you need to do is you need to think about it in reverse. Well, I'm now the buyer of the piece of property. So I don't want to pay a high interest rate. And if I could pay as little interest as I can, unlike the bank where they're trying to make as much interest as they can, I'm trying to pay as little because if I pay less in interest, more of it is going towards the principal amount. That is key number 2. Okay? With every payment that I make at 0% interest, that payment is coming right off the balance. So in my training, I tell people all the time, I go, you need not worry about the numbers. Now, if you're in wholesale your entire career, you're so used to going to Zillow and calculating MAO and percentage of ARV and all these different things that you technically don't need in seller finance. I need one thing, and that's time. The more time I get, let's think about it like this. The more time the bank gets, the more money they make. How do they make their money? They make their money in interest. So a bank is looking for the highest interest with the most amount of time. If I'm the buyer, I'm looking for the lowest interest with the most amount of time. Because unlike a bank that would collect a fee and their interest all the time, they don't care whether or not the property goes up and down in value. But when you get a low interest rate and the payments that you're making are going to principal balance or the principal amount each and every month, every single time you make a payment to the seller, you're literally making a payment to yourself because you're knocking the loan balance due. So you need to understand before you go ahead and try to pitch seller finance, you need to have a firm understanding on how a bank makes money, and then you need to do it completely opposite for yourself. You go into Chevrolet and you go to buy a Corvette. The Corvette dealer or the Chevrolet dealer is looking to charge you the highest interest rate with the longest amount of time. Now, when I was growing up, you didn't see leases or financing terms past 48 months. Now you see lease terms and financing terms at 84 months. And why do they now offer 84 months? Because if you hold the loan for 84 months, they're going to make 1.5 times the value of the car, right? So the longer they have it out, the more money they make. The longer you structure your deal, the more comes off principal balance, which is real equity. Okay? So it's so important to understand how a bank makes money in order for you to put really effective seller finance deals together. All right. You are looking for, you can put your questions in the chat box. If you guys have any questions, go ahead and throw them in there. If you are on Instagram, head on over to Facebook group. Jared, if you're still on there, bud, I'd love to have you on the Facebook group. Just go to Creative Real Estate with Cash Money Mike. You can watch live there. I'd love to have you live in here, buddy, instead of in here if you're still on. My man Jared is a great guy. He is out in Charlotte and runs a real estate meetup here, which is amazing. All right, so put your questions in the chat box, and I will answer them live. If you'd like to come on in here live, there is a link right there. You don't have to be shy. I'm going to go ahead and paste it again. This is a Q&A, so I'm happy to bring you in backstage. We could talk all about anything that you want to talk about. Antonio, you got a question. Melissa, you have a question. I know Antonio and I are actually underwriting a deal, so I don't want to technically underwrite a deal on here, but I do want to help people. So I'm happy to. I'm happy to help you. All right, let's keep it rolling. Now, if you're following along over the past couple of days, what I've been doing is, should we get a conversation table, Mike? Let's see what that question is. It says, Melissa says, should we get a conversation table, Mike, to practice? Well, I mean, we can practice. We can practice right now. I mean, if you want to kind of jump on here, you can ask me some questions, or you could ask whatever you'd like, and I'm really happy to help. But when you say like get a conversation table to practice, it's what am I looking for in order for you to really have a good conversation. You need to understand what you're looking for before you go looking for it, right? So that's why having a firm grasp on what um, how a bank makes money and how you're trying to structure the deal will literally start to push my questions in a different direction, right? So if I get on the phone with a seller, and I'm talking to a seller, and the seller is like, um, I'll ask a couple of I'll kind of lead with 5 questions, right? I'll say, are you the one who owns the piece of property? Are you wanting to sell? What kind of a time frame are you looking to sell in? And then the next question I get into is occupancy and vacancy. So is it occupied or is it vacant? And those two triggers kind of lead me down the path for me to understand what the house needs, how much money they're getting, what the taxes on the piece of property are like, what the insurance on the piece of property is like, and ultimately what I'm doing is I'm asking really invasive questions, or what you would refer to as invasive questions, and I hide it behind really good rapport. Okay, so Mr. Seller, tell me a little bit about your tenants. Now, if they go, my tenants are great, I go, how great are they? I haven't had any turnover in this place in the last 5 years. There's another checkbox off on the underwriting piece that I want to know. That'll help me to understand not only from an underwriting standpoint, but it'll help me to understand on whether or not I've got a real seller on the phone. When somebody says to me, I love my tenants, I haven't had any turnover in 5 years, the next question out of my mouth is, have you raised the rents recently? If they say no, then that tells me that they don't really invest the same way you and I invest. Because the right thing to do is to try to push rents and force value, right? We've got a direct correlation towards how the money in, that if I get more money in, it raises the value of the property. So if I'm really just worried about keeping my tenants here and keeping my rent low because I want to keep it full, then what you're telling me is that, number one, it's under rented. You're telling me who you are and how you operate. And I start checking off these little boxes where you are literally peeling an onion back and saying, I am a true tired landlord. I don't want to go through the hassle of raising somebody's rent and have to find another tenant. I don't want to go through the hassle of renovating the piece of property or making changes to the inside of the unit because I keep my rents low and my tenant is happy. So those are the things that you're trying to understand. You're not trying to understand the money. You're trying to understand who the seller is. So if I find a seller that has a piece of property that's owned in their personal name, that tells me, hey, I don't know how to protect my assets. Checkbox number one. If you have 10 units and 5 are vacant, checkbox number two. If you love your tenants, checkbox number three. If you haven't raised rents, checkbox number four. If everybody's on a month-to-month lease, you're now telling me that you don't want to deal with leases. Checkbox number 5. Mr. Seller, do they pay you with a check every month? Or no, I go around every Friday and I collect the cash. Checkbox number 6. So understanding who a tired landlord is will help you to put these deals together. Okay? We got a question. Facebook user says, when is interest-only payments useful? Well, in order for you to understand when they're useful, you have to understand where they go, right? So if I make you interest-only payments, I'm paying you flat interest, and that money is going in your pocket, right? So when would it make sense to give somebody interest-only payments? Well, that seller is probably a little greedy. That seller probably hasn't thought of interest, and I'm going to offer interest only payments because they haven't thought of it, they haven't brought it up, so I'll bring it up and I'll say, what if I made you small interest only payments and that money went straight to your pocket? Now I want you to think about this for a second. Is if, let's hypothetically say you can get $1,500 a month in rent. And if I went to an amortization table and I calculated interest payments, or not interest only payments, but I actually amortized whatever amount that they were going to lend to me, because technically they're lending me their equity. They're not lending me money, right? If somebody has a piece of house that's a piece of property that's paid off, and it's worth $100,000. They're not giving me $100,000 to buy the house. They're saying this little thing is worth $100,000. And you're saying, okay, great. And you're going to make payments towards this until it's paid off. They're not lending you their money. They're lending you the equity, which is money in theory, right? It's money. It's just not cold, hard cash. Where a bank would literally lend you the money, that money goes to that person's bank account to buy this. And then that person's gone. Right? They take off. But when they lend you the equity, they are around forever because they are the bank, technically, until you pay it off. So when you have a seller that's greedy, they want more money than what the property is worth, I might overpay them by a couple of bucks and then make them small interest only payments, as opposed to running to an amortization table and having the payment come out to be higher. So I never bring up interest. I merely ask the seller. I'll say, if I made you equal monthly payments every single month and that payment hit your account every single month, what do you want the payment to look like? And they'll say, well, I want my thing to hit, I want it to be $600. And I go, well, $600 is a lot of money. And I only think I can get $1,500 in rent. I probably have to fight for it. So if I give you $600 a month, and then I got to pay my taxes and my insurance and my maintenance, and that's another $600, you're asking me to put down this down payment, and I'm only going to make, let's say they ask for a down payment, I'm only going to make $300 a month. I'd say, why don't we do this? Why don't I just split that in half? I'll give you $300 a month, straight interest only payments. So that money goes right inside your pocket, and I'll make you 36 payments before the interest actually kicks in. And what I say by interest actually kicks in, I'm talking about the amortized interest. So it makes sense when you've got somebody who's greedy, and it also makes sense when you have somebody who's not willing to give you enough time. Because technically, I want to keep these for the rest of my life. But if somebody's not willing to give you enough time, when you ask for time, you're going to get three responses. No. What do you mean by time? Or how much? Four responses. No. What do you mean by time? How much time do you need? Or you could take as much time as you need. When I hear you could take as much time as you need, I'm like, we got a deal. When I hear how much time do you need, now I'm going into negotiation mode. When somebody says, what do you mean by time? They don't understand what I'm trying to accomplish. So now, instead of me going, well, I'm going to make you the bank, they're going to go, oh, no. No, I don't want that. I don't want to be the bank. So when you ask for time, those are the four responses you're going to get. What do you mean by time? How much time do you need? What do you mean by time? If you're joining me on Instagram, go ahead and head over to Facebook. No, right? First one is no. What do you mean by time? How much time do you need? Or as much time as you need. When you hear as much time as you need, you got a deal. So when somebody's not willing to give you enough time, technically you're not able to hold it. So what you need there in response to the interest only payments is equity. In other words, you've got to be buying it at a slight discount. And all you're going to do is you're going to pay some money to hold it so you can go in and renovate it and put it back on the market. You can assign these deals. Okay. Let's get into some questions here. If you don't follow me, you can follow me on IG at Cash Money Mike. I've got a private Facebook group, which is this is a man. We're up to about 1,000 members inside this group, which is absolutely amazing. You can go ahead and scan that QR code right there to get into the Creative Real Estate Academy. There is no charge for this group at all. You can scan that code right now, and you can jump into the Creative Real Estate Academy. Got about 1,000 members in there. I just launched this group. We've got about 1,000 members in there. I'm going to be posting a bunch of content in there, which is absolutely amazing. So if you're interested in that, you can get into that. And then obviously you can find me on YouTube, and you can also find me on Twitter. You can find me on all the platforms. At the end of the day, you can find me everywhere on all the platforms. Okay. All right. Who here has questions? If you're joining me on Instagram, head on over to YouTube or head on over to Facebook. There's a link in here. You can go ahead and ask to join. I'm happy to bring you in, get you a little exposure. I'll answer all of your questions, and go from there. The Elite Sales and Seller Finance Mastery is coming up on August 11th and 12th. You guys can scan that there and get a ticket to that. That's going to be an amazing event. My man Max Jimenez and myself, 2-day live virtual event. Going to go over Max's sales system and my seller finance training. We're going to marry the two and bring you an amazing experience. It's right at about 10 hours of training. 2 hours of Q&A. There's 3 different ticket options there. You can go ahead. You can take a $197 ticket, which will get you all of the trainings. We're going to do that live. You can take a $297 ticket, which will get you the recordings of everything that we're doing, as well as some other stuff. Or you could take a $497 ticket, and if you get the $497 ticket, you are going to get entered to get a first and all expenses paid trip to Wholesaling Live. Now, Wholesaling Live is an absolutely amazing event. When I say amazing event, this is a one of a kind event in San Antonio, Texas. I am a VIP in there, along with my man Max and other high-level real estate influencers. I'm gonna send you a plane ticket. I'm giving away 2 of these, by the way. I'm gonna send you a plane ticket. I'm gonna put you up in my hotel. I'm gonna break some bread with you. I'm then going to give you a ticket to the event, and then when you lock up a deal live, hopefully you get one. There's about 500 participants in this thing. If you lock up a deal live, you're going to get to keep some of that money, which is going to be absolutely amazing. So those are the tickets for the Elite Sales and Seller Finance Mastery. My man Max Musati says, follow Cash Money Mike on Instagram. I appreciate you, brother. I appreciate you. All right, Facebook user says, so is the amortization separate from the interest payments? Well, here's the thing. Someone just scanned the QR code. I appreciate you. So is the amortization separate from those interest payments? The answer is yes and no. So, an amortization table, what it's going to do is let's talk about Wells Fargo. You go into Wells Fargo, you want to buy a house, right? The bank says, "Hey, I'm going to give you a 30-year loan," right? And there's interest that's calculated inside of that 30-year loan. So, for instance, if you go to any amortization calculator, if you punch in a $300,000 loan at 30 years at a 6% interest rate, you might pay $347,000 in interest. So at the end of 30 years, your $300,000 purchase turns into $647,000. $300,000 for the purchase, $347,000 for the interest, for a grand total of $647,000. Right? And every time you make that payment, there's a certain portion of it that's going to interest and a certain portion that's going to principal. Interest only payments are going straight to the seller. It's not knocking the balance down at all. It's money that they pocket. So if you're savvy, what you'll do is you'll give them the $100,000 that they're asking for instead of trying to buy it at a discount. You'll tell them that you'll guarantee them 3 years interest only payments. You'll calculate it at $300 a month. You'll multiply it by 12. You'll have $3,600. You'll multiply that by 3, and then you'll tell the seller, "Hey, I'm going to wind up paying you close to $115,000 this way." So, Facebook user, I hope that helped, is the amortization is separate from those interest payments. Interest only payments are going straight to the seller. Straight to the seller. An amortized loan, somebody's going to lend you their equity. Let's say it's $100,000 and they're asking for 4% interest. The question is, could you pay it? Sure, you could pay it, but you have to make sure that the rental rate is high enough that once you pay that payment, including your taxes, insurance, and everything, you've got enough of a spread in there so that you could actually make some money. That makes sense. So, I'm going to teach all this in the Elite Sales and Seller Finance Mastery 2.0. You're going to get Max Jimenez and myself. That definitely helps clear the fog in my head. Yeah, it's very, very simple. Very, very simple. Honestly, you need not overcomplicate it. I think what winds up happening is that people want to run to an amortization table. And you don't really need to, because here's what happens. If you run to an amortization table, that payment might be higher per month than if you simply asked, right? Like you could ask and say, "Hey, if I made you equal monthly payments of $400 a month, how do you feel about that?" Instead of you going to an amortization table, calculating 6% interest and saying, "Hey, I'm going to give you 6% interest and I'm going to make you payments of $700 a month." You see, you overpaid by 3. So what you need to do is you need to ask. Yeah, wow, I get it, man. But most people, or lady, I'm sorry, it just says Facebook user, so I don't know who you are. But ultimately, you need to ask. You need to ask. That'll help you. I'm glad that helped. That helped a lot. I get it now. Perfect. Perfect. So what you're doing is you're starting to understand principal and interest, right? Like where the money goes. That's the most important piece of this thing, is where does the money go? Well, think about it like this. I said this last night. if Because there's really 5 ways you make money in seller finance. See, in wholesale and novations, you make money one way and you get paid once. With seller finance, I get paid every month. month over month, year over year. And I make money 5 different ways. I make money through the cash flow. I make money through the leverage. I make money through the tax advantages. I make money through the appreciation. And I make money through the principal paydown. Wholesale and novations, you get paid once. I get paid 5 times. Literally 5 times. So imagine this, Facebook user. Imagine this. If the rate of appreciation in your market is 10%, in other words, you buy a piece of property now, and in 1 year, it's worth 10% more. And the next year, it's worth 10% more. And the next year, it's worth 10% more. Obviously, you would be calculating it where 100,000 turns into 110. The next year, you would add 10% to 110,000, whatever that came out to be. So let's keep everything simple and say it was just 10% a year, where it's $10,000 a year over 10 years. That means in 10 years worth of time, that property is going to be worth $200,000. So the question is, would I pay $50,000 over what the fair market value is today if I had a 10-year term to pay it off? Hell yeah. I'm guaranteed $50,000 in equity. I'm going to give up some of that equity to the seller. But guess what? I didn't come out of pocket for it. I'm not paying for it. My tenant is. The market is going to take care of that overage, all while the rental rates go up. You see, you have to think about the big money game, not just the acquisition strategy. And that's what I'm going to go over in this Elite Sales and Seller Finance Mastery. Okay? All right, if you're joining me on Instagram, go ahead, head on over to YouTube or Facebook. I'm glad that's helped you, Facebook user. I appreciate it. The Elite Sales and Seller Finance Mastery 2.0, a live virtual event. Myself and Max Jimenez, a top sales performance expert inside the game. We're going to marry seller finance and high-level sales, show you how to get into the creative conversation, show you how to navigate it effectively, and probably show you a big mistake that you're all making by not understanding this creative strategy. Because I promise you, if you're doing wholesale or you're doing novations and you're trying to buy property at a discount, it's so much easier to give people what they want and exchange for one thing. That is time. I don't negotiate price. I negotiate time because I know where the money goes. I know what's going to move a seller. I know that the money is going to move a seller. So in a room full of wholesalers that have to buy it at a discount, your boy comes out the back and goes, "Hey, Mr. Seller, I'll give you exactly what you want, as long as you give me the time that I need." Not the terms, the time. If you say to a seller, "Hey, I got a great idea. I want you to be the bank. I want you to seller finance me the house. I'm going to give you 6% interest, and then I'm going to balloon you out in 30 years. The next thing you're going to hear is going to be a dial tone. Got to know how to get into the creative conversation, and that's where I come in. All right. All right, so Elite Sales and Seller Finance Mastery is there. Again, if you'd like to get into the Creative Real Estate Academy, that is a private Facebook group. If you want something a little bit more than that, you can get into the Seller Finance Boardroom. Now, the Seller Finance Boardroom is a completely private group, just like the Creative Real Estate Academy. The difference with that is that it's a small paid group. It's only $99 a month, but I got a bunch of my students in there. I've got a bunch of uploaded videos. I throw some free trainings in there. You can bring your deals into that group, and we'll underwrite them. I'll also pitch these deals with you. So that's an amazing place to go ahead and take advantage if you want something a little bit light. You're not into spending a ton of money. You want to wrap your head around seller finance. You can go ahead and you can scan that QR code there. Get into the seller finance boardroom. There's about 60 members in there. A lot of my students in there. Everybody's looking to do deals. And there's no contracts. You can come on in for a month. You can come on in for 2 months. You can come on in for 3 months. If somebody was smart here, what you do is you take a ticket for the Elite Sales and Seller Finance Mastery and you join the boardroom. And for a small investment, you could be so much farther ahead. So go ahead and scan that QR code if you're interested in that. And then if you want the big boy, you want the real training. That's my seller finance training. That's a $3,900 ticket. That's 18 hours of the real deal. Okay. It says 15 hours there, but it's really 18 hours. Okay. So those are your three options. If anybody, we got another thing here. Yeah, I've been struggling with not using words like terms. Yeah, it's difficult because a lot, I don't teach theory. I teach practicality. So practical use, like how do you get from point A to point B? And it's very difficult to sell something when you don't understand it. It's very, very difficult. So what most people do is they run to YouTube University, right? And you're watching other people talk about it. And ultimately what happens is that as a wholesaler, you swim in a huge pool of competition, right? You've got brand new investors who again are on YouTube University trying to understand wholesale. So they're pulling the exact same lists that you're pulling. They're skip tracing the exact same lists. They have the same cold callers or whatever you're doing. You guys have the same script and you're all trying to buy it at a discount. Crazy. Crazy. I say this to people all the time. Like, what makes you believe you're going to be lucky caller number 9 on the day? And you're going to find that one needle in the haystack that's like, hey, yeah, you know what? You could buy my house at a discount. Wholesaling is sales and marketing. If you want to get into sales and marketing, you should open up an e-com store. You'll have less liability and you can make much more money selling a low ticket item. But if you want to be a real estate investor, you've got to hold property. And that's the only way you get all the incentives that the government offers, like all the tax advantages and stuff. When you hear about, President Trump not paying taxes, it's because he uses the tax code to his advantage. And when you really understand that and you understand seller finance as an acquisition strategy, my God, you can create huge amounts of wealth very, 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 very quickly. But the minute you say to somebody, "Hey, I'll give you what you want if you give me the terms," they're going to be like, What are you talking about?" Don't really understand what that means. So you've got to ask things in CRAN language, and I'm going to give you a couple of pointers right now. So I get on the phone. I'll lead with cash. And when I get kicked in the ass and they're like, nope, I'm not going to sell you this piece of property at a discount, I'll simply say, hey, Mr. Seller, if I gave you what you wanted, how much time would you give me to pay it off? I just asked for a balloon. Mr. Seller, if I made you equal monthly payments every single month, what do you want those payments to look like? I've just asked for 0% interest. Okay? So a couple of things you can take with you to ultimately help you. All right? All right, we are coming up on right at about 1 hour. We've got about 6 minutes left. I'm going to cap this at an hour. If anybody has any questions, now is the time. Again, if you'd like to get into the Creative Real Estate Academy, that is the code for the free Facebook group. The Elite Sales and Seller Finance Mastery, high level sales, high level creative. You're going to get a chance to win a one of a kind experience. Actually, two lucky winners are going to get a chance to win a one of a kind experience. I'm going to send you a plane ticket. I'm going to put you up in my hotel. I'm going to give you a ticket to Wholesaling Live. I'm then going to coach you while we're there. And when you get stuck on the phone and you don't know how to close it, all you got to do is raise your hand. Your boy will run on over, close that deal for you, and you'll get paid. So that's going to be an amazing event. There are a limited amount of space left for this. So if you're interested in it, now is the time. Do not wait. Now is the time to get into that because it is virtual. You don't have to leave the comfort of your own home. You don't have to buy a plane ticket. You don't have to buy a hotel room to come see me live. There's a lot of people that choose to do that, but you don't have to do that. And for that price point, you'd be a fool not to get in. If you'd like the Seller Finance Boardroom, a little bit more higher level, you can get around some of my students. We'll do some live call breakdown. I go in there once a month. Actually, I go in there tomorrow at 10 a.m., which is going to be amazing. And then the actual Seller Finance training that you can take advantage of. Okay. All right. Listen, I appreciate you all being here. Again, this is brought to you by Wholesaling Live. Wholesaling Live is the absolute premier event. If you have never been to Wholesaling Live, this thing is absolutely amazing. It is the best, literally the best. Um, the best uh, event that you could find. The best. You can lock up deals, lockups. Actually, they're going to do something a little bit different. They're going to do something a little bit different this year. Is they're going to add in a sub two, so you can literally pick up a subject to house and go home with it, which is crazy. And again, here's the Elite Sales and Seller Finance Mastery. And that's it. All right. Listen, I appreciate you joining me. I will see you next time. Make sure that you guys tune in every day at about 7 p.m. Eastern. I'm going to be going live on IG, giving you guys a bunch of stuff. Make sure you're following me on YouTube. Follow me on Facebook. If you like what you see here, go ahead and share it. That's the biggest compliment you can give to me. I don't want you to buy anything. Just share my stuff so that more and more people are aware. And I hope to have you as a student soon.